Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Welcome to a faith and finance webinar focused on financial independence for imams and community educators. This session is a continuation of a discussion we had at the AMJA conference a few weeks ago in Dallas, Texas. That was the American Muslim Jurists Association. We had a wonderful conversation with several community leaders and imams, and we wanted to elaborate more as Crescent Private Wealth on some essential techniques and tactics for our imams, community leaders, to best set themselves up for financial success and financial independence. Inshallah, today I'm joined with my brother Azaz Mehmood, who is based in Indiana, and he and I will both be talking about personal finance for the individual, for the imam. He'll be talking a little more about finances and how capital markets work, and we'll also end with a small discussion on endowments and building financial futures for masajid. At the very end of the presentation of the conference, we'll have a question and answer section, but you can feel free to look down below on Zoom and use the Q&A functionality to let us know if you have any questions. There's also an option to change and to send us some feedback if we're going a bit too fast, but too slow, let us know. We're here to provide the most amount of value for our community leaders and our imams as they provide that value for us and for our communities. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Azaz will bring up some slides right now, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, Azaz. As mentioned, we are proud to represent Crescent Private Wealth, which is one of the largest by-Muslim, for-Muslim independent investment advisors in the country. Our entire mission and focus is to provide the most amount of value for Muslims across America. And welcome to our Faith and Finance session, inshallah. So what is financial freedom? What is financial success? I think we need to start, before we even talk about money and how to make more money, how to set ourselves up for success, to understand what does success mean. It's not about having $1 million in the bank account. It's about having the freedom that money can give us. If you think about it in the most plain terms, none of us love to mow our lawns, but through having a little bit extra cash in our accounts, that gives us that freedom, that flexibility to pay someone to take care of that for us. Additionally, money gives us the freedom to maybe opt out of a job we don't want to have so we can focus on the things that we really care about. Maybe we can leave our corporate endeavors and fully commit to being part of the Muslim community and to supporting our communities. Additionally, for our younger audience, it gives us the freedom to go for Hajj. Maybe an employer says, you know what, you can't take 2 weeks off. If we have that financial freedom, it gives us that backbone to allow ourselves to thrive and to make our values stand out and shine. So money does not mean being rich. It means having freedom. And now there are 4 key habits to really helping us build our financial futures. The first one, what I think, when we talk about budgeting, is not to consider zakat as part of the last bucket, but of the very first. Whenever we have money coming into our bank accounts, the first thought we should have is, let me give a little bit to the masjid. Let me give a little bit to this community organization. Let me put as much barakah in my money from the very moment it comes into my account, such that as it keeps growing and keeps developing for my community, it always has that barakah. Secondly, the importance of a credit score and a credit card is very critical to understand and note. We all can understand that debt is a financial trap, riba is a financial trap, but we have to understand that a credit score and a credit card is somewhat vitally important in this American society to help us build that opportunity for a financial future. If we pursue a Sharia compliant mortgage or something like that, they will pull our credit report. They will look at that. So ensuring that we are playing that balance of not letting ourselves fall into riba, not letting ourselves fall into that vicious cycle, while also ensuring that we are building a credit score so we can develop that history is critical. One other portion that I highly recommend is to live within our means or live below our means. If we're earning, say, $60,000 a year, we should be aiming to live at $50,000 a year. We want to delay our gratification as much as possible. Maybe we can push off a vacation or a fun trip. We can push off buying a new car and keep our used car for an extra year or two. Having that delayed gratification kind of removing ourselves from the Amazon Prime lifestyle of everything being delivered in 2 hours or 2 days, allows us to invest more deeply in our financial future. And finally, very crucially, to this entire schema of our personal finances is building a budget and understanding what our money is doing for us. If I asked everyone in this room, and you please feel free to put in the chat or as a Q&A, how much you're making, I'm sure we'd all know down to the penny. But on the other side, how many of us know exactly how much we're spending per month? So it's critical to track your budget. And on the next slide here, I'm going to show you a rough template that I recommend to most people about what budget to leverage. And this variant I had written for a slightly younger teenage audience. So you'll see some references to Haraz and Boba Tea, but it encapsulates the 50-30-20 budget that I still think is valuable for anyone at any age. We spend 50% on those things that are essential to us living our lives. This is food and groceries. It's our rent. It's maybe our house payments. And we'll talk more about some financial strategies for offsetting some of the taxes around that down the road. It's our basic clothing and food. And of course, it's zakat. Then we have the wants category. And I have that here in red because we need to stop every time we think about the wants category. We need to maybe see, can I delay this? Can I push this a little further on down the road? This is also what I like to think of as the guilt-free spending category. Maybe we want to buy a new iPhone. I know new iPhones just came out yesterday, and they're so marvelously thin. Maybe we want to upgrade. So we need to look in our wants category if we have the finances to allow us to do that. Maybe we're looking at Jumma and seeing that parking line is very long, and we're thinking, why don't I Uber instead of trying to find a parking spot? If this want category has the finances to support that, maybe it's not the worst idea in the world. We got to treat ourselves once in a while. But then critically, and what my brother Azaz is going to talk all about, is our saving and investing category. It's where we're building our long-term financial future. So we need to start with an emergency fund. And I recommend to everyone to have about 3 to 6 months of your expenses tied into an emergency fund. This could be sitting in a zero interest checking account. It could be in a small brokerage account invested in sukuks. But having that very easily accessible 3 to 6 months worth of expenses and of income is very important. And our savings categories also needs to be purified, ensuring that we're investing in Sharia compliant assets, that our money is growing for us in this category. And finally, this also ties into maybe we want to start a side business. Maybe we've really dived into understanding the produce industry from working at the masjid, and we see our little cafe, our kitchen, how it needs, fresh vegetables and fruit. Maybe we start a business from that. That all comes into the save and invest category. But now when it comes to actually investing, I'd like to pass over the proverbial mic, to my brother Azaz Mehmood, who will talk more about financial markets and what does it mean to actually invest.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us. It's an honor and a privilege to be presenting to you guys today. I think the goal with my half of this presentation is to talk about some of the macroeconomic factors which affect your day-to-day lives and how we can condense that down into the personal level and how you can use the modern economic system for your benefit and for the benefit of your communities. So we're going to cover the 4 factors of financial ruin. These are the economic forces which are constant, which drain capital from us. It drains capital from society. It actually causes poverty at a macroeconomic level. We're going to learn about the stock market and the relationship between Sharia compliance and the stock market today. And then we're going to talk about building wealth systems. And to talk a little bit about a wealth system, I think when I have a lot of clients in the office, many of them think that wealth is a number. If I make X amount of dollars, then I'll never have to worry about money again. And I don't mean to pick on Mr. Ariza here in the picture, but time and time again, you may have heard of a famous celebrity or an athlete or someone like that who made a lot of money during their life. They had, shortly after leaving their career, they lose it all, or they declare bankruptcy, and they're not able to hold on to that money. And I would tell Mr. Ariza, if he was my client, that he received some bad financial advice, that the financial advisor in his life didn't build a system around the lifestyle that he had started to create for himself. So here on the left side, and I'm not going to read the slides, I would just encourage you guys to read the slides as we're going along. Knowing the economic forces that we're going to discuss, budgeting, as my brother Kashif so kindly and as stated in the earlier part of this presentation, and then creating passive growth, passive sources of income for yourself along the way, and understanding your cash flow and monitoring these things as your life and as your financial journey progresses. So, what are the four macroeconomic forces in the world which are driving wealth and poverty at the same time? Those four are inflation, tax inefficiencies, loss of purchasing power, and debt. We're going to start with inflation. Now, some of you may have heard some of these terms along the way, but we're going to just define it for everyone as a group. Inflation, as I've kind of noted here, is the gradual loss of purchasing power over time, and it is the way that we measure the increase of prices of goods and services over time. So many of you have probably seen over the course of your lifetimes the cost of housing, food, gasoline, all of these things tend to go up over time. It's not just because we have more people, but it's actually a consequence, a side effect of the modern economic system. All governments in the world print currency. That currency enters the economy, and those dollars are chasing finite goods and services. And so over time, we measure the increase, the change in prices as inflation. The problem with inflation, and I have it highlighted down here, is that inflation compounds, right? So for every year of inflation, you're adding to the inflation that occurred in the previous years. And this is kind of what that would look like. So here, I've just given a very rough example. Over 10 years, if the average inflation per year is 3%, the total inflation down here at the bottom right would be 34%. If you're making $100,000 a year, and over the next 10 years, you continue to make $100,000 each year, by the end of the 10th year, the world will have gotten 34% more expensive for you, even though you're making the same nominal amount of money. In other words, in order for you to have the same quality of life in 10 years as you do today, earning $100,000, you would need to proportionally make $134,000 in tomorrow's money. So again, this is not something that can be controlled. It can't be stopped exactly. It's just a consequence of the way that the economies of the world work. We print currency for the sake of commerce, and that currency it loses purchasing power over time. Another way to think about this is cash is not a good store of value. It is a method for exchanging value. Okay. This is actually directly pulled from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. It shows the gradual loss of purchasing power over time. Purchasing power in the dollar and inflation are not directly correlated, but it's a good kind of visual representation of a dollar today is not worth what a dollar used to be. Okay, over time you can see that a dollar in the early 1900s would have been substantially more buying power than you have today. So we're going to talk about Sharia compliance. We're going to talk about the stock market, but first I'd like to define a few terms for you with regards to assets, right? So I've taught you, I've taught you the basics of the forces that are keeping you poor. We need to understand why investing is important, not just for making money, not just to buy nice things, but in order to protect the wealth that you create over your lifetime and how to pass that wealth on to the next generation so that they don't have to start over from where you did. First and foremost, we want to define our relationship with Sharia compliance. Crescent Private Wealth is very strictly Sharia compliance. We are very strictly Sharia compliant for our portfolios, for our models, and for our clients. We rely heavily on the the Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institutions. This is a third-party nonprofit organization. It's globally recognized. It's a group of imams and Muslim financial professionals that liaise and coordinate and write the Sharia guidelines for accounting and finance and investing each year. They also provide third-party auditing services for certain financial institutions. And this is very important, right? Because we don't want to leave Sharia compliance to my discretion or another advisor's discretion or another person's discretion. We want to have a consensus as much as possible, inshallah. So the asset classifications. This is a really cool visual diagram that I like to show my clients. It's the value of what a $100 investment would be from 1970, what that would be worth today in essentially the 2020s, right? So you have all these different asset types. You have corporate bonds, gold, treasuries, real estate, cash. And this says S&P 500. We'll define that in a minute. But I wanted to show you the power of investing, especially with regards to time. The number one most valuable asset that any investor has is time, right? The earlier you start, the higher likelihood that you're going to be able to buy things at great prices. And the longer you have to invest, the more likely those assets are to increase in value over time. And essentially, that's all an asset is. An asset is any stock, bond, commodity, whatever it is. It's something which holds, preserves, and hopefully increases in value over time. We all know this. We probably have seen the stock market. We've all seen the price of gold skyrocket in the last decade or so. Those are assets. What this is showing you, though, is that not all assets are equal with regard to return. The S&P 500, and I'm going to talk about this in a moment, is essentially a market where stocks are traded. A stock is a piece of a company. We call that, this is equity ownership of a company, right? Equities. And the S&P 500 is just an index which collects the 500 most valuable stocks or companies in the world and aggregates them for you. So what is the stock market? It's just like any other market, right? We go to the market to buy produce. We go to the market for all kinds of things. The stock market is just a global exchange of assets. So all the assets we talked about in the previous slide, those are traded in the stock market: gold, real estate, equities, etc. If you recognize this blue line, this is actually the same line from the dollar chart that I had shown you earlier in the presentation, right? It's this diagram. It's just the same data represented a different way. This yellow line is the S&P 500. You can kind of think about it as the EKG for the United States economy, right? Over time, you can see that more dollars enter the system, and the value of each singular dollar decreases in purchasing power, right? The money is worth less over time because we keep printing more of it, for one example. However, that money comes into our hands through the economy, and then we go and buy goods and services. We buy food, we build roads, we build schools, houses, we travel, we do all kinds of things. We participate in the global economy. Those dollars end up in the market, right? It ends up in the hands of the companies which control the market share. So if you are a top 5 company in the transportation industry or the electronics industry or the energy industry, you're going to profit very handsomely from the commerce that is being generated thanks to your dominance in that market share. I don't want to belabor the point too much, but the idea is very simple. Over time, we want to trade our dollars for assets. We want to, as Kashif was saying, you want to live within your means. You want to have your needs. You want to have your wants. Of course, the purpose of life is not to accumulate money. We want to spend that money, and we want to be, enjoying our lives along the way, inshallah. But when it comes to creating wealth, you have to trade this depreciating asset, which is currency, into appreciating assets. Whether that's gold or real estate or equities, that's really entirely up to the investor. But this is the global trend that I want to teach many of you today. And again, if anyone has any questions, please enter the chat. I know I'm covering a lot of material in a very short period of time, but I'm happy to take questions at the end of the presentation. One thing that a lot of investors worry about is, stock market crashes or losing money on an investment, and that is valid. Part of our job is to make sure that that doesn't happen. What we want to try to encourage you to, as you begin your investment journey, is you can throw a very wide net. You can buy a little bit of a lot of companies, thanks to modern technology and modern investment techniques. And rather than putting all of your money into one stock, you can just buy a piece of the entire global market and participate along the way. This chart represents the kind of up and down motion of the stock market. So, for example, in a given year, in 2020, during the pandemic, the market was down as much as 34%. But, and I'd like to really emphasize this point, even during a year where people were not working, when airplanes weren't allowed to fly, when ships weren't allowed to come into harbor, literally the entire global economy stopped. Even during that year, the market at the end of the year was still up 16%. Please think about that. So it's we still need to have goods and services, right? As long as there's people, there's going to be a demand for goods and services. And as long as there's a demand, there are going to be companies and a market to supply those goods and services for money. And you want to participate in that movement of money along the way. So, kind of summarizing everything to a point, there are fundamental forces in the economy, inflation, debt, tax inefficiency, and loss of purchasing power, which cause you to be poor. If you don't make more money over time, you're losing the power of your money over time as well. You can't just hide it under the mattress for tomorrow. At the same time, if you use time, if you leverage time to your advantage, you can buy incredible Sharia compliant companies, which will maintain your value and increase your value over time. And then obviously, if you want to manage that and make it more efficient, you try to rely on professional guidance and coming to people who are educated and trained to do this for you, inshallah. So, and finally, we're going to talk about very, very briefly just building a wealth system. When I mean a wealth system, it's everything. It's looking at all the money that's coming in and out of your life. I want to emphasize the value of expertise, right? You don't have to know everything. I don't know everything about taxes. I don't know everything about law, but I rely on my Muslim brothers and sisters who are expertise in these fields to help me build a system around myself and my family. And I want to encourage you guys to start exploring and doing the same. Obviously, through Crescent Private Wealth, you'll have access to our network of professionals that we work with, inshallah. But the other thing I want to show you on the right side of the screen is look at how many strategies can be involved with just a single client's income. Money comes into a household, and there are so many different buckets and categories of ways that we can save money and create tax efficiency and build wealth for clients that it becomes very, very complicated very quickly. But the importance of a wealth system is the same. We want to look at the money coming into your life. We want to save as much of it as possible. We want to spend it as needed. And the remaining balance, we want to start to use compounding growth over time to build wealth for you. Part of this is really being efficient with our taxes. Some of you may know through perhaps an endowment or perhaps in one of your employers that you've participated in a plan, an investment or a retirement plan. These usually come in two flavors. Either they're traditional investments like a 401k or an IRA, or they can be Roth. You may have heard this term before, Roth IRAs, for example. I don't want to get too into the minutia, but each of these has different tax benefits. Working with a professional, you guys can understand which bucket to put your money in to get yourself the maximum flexibility and hopefully return in your own personal financial situations. But I would like to show you this this chart here on the bottom. This kind of blue shark fin is a really great example of what I mean when I say tax efficiency. This dark blue fin, this represents Roth money. The medium blue represents a traditional investment like a 401k or IRA. The very, very light blue, this is just taxable investments. Here you can see we started at the age of 35. If this person at the age of 35 put the same amount of money into each of these three types of accounts, at the end of their lifetime, they would have three vastly different outcomes. Why? Part of the benefit of participating in certain plans like a 401k or an IRA is the government is giving you a tax benefit for participating. Why? Because they don't want you to retire and have to rely on the system. You will get Social Security, but they don't want you to completely have to rely on that. So they incentivize you to participate in the economy by giving you a tax benefit. If you just put all of your money into a regular investment account, the problem is, even though you're going to make money, along the way, every time you make money, you're going to have to pay a capital gains tax. So for easy numbers, we'll say 20%. Each year, 20% of your money is going to the government. It doesn't directly benefit you in that way. Over time, it stagnates your compounding growth. In these top two fins, you can see the benefit of having tax deferred growth. If you put money in a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA, the growth of the money that you put in is you don't pay taxes during the lifetime of that investment. The only difference is in this medium blue fin in the middle, you start to have to pay taxes when you sell the investment and take the money out. In a Roth account, you don't pay taxes, right? So the money that goes into the account is tax-free, or I'm sorry, is after-tax money. It grows tax-deferred, and you're able to withdraw it tax-free. And so in this kind of visual representation, you can see the benefit of each of the three. Ideally, you get to a point in your lives when you can do all three, right? In kind of, if you have all three, for example, you want to rely after the age of, let's say, 65, you want to rely on your traditional investments first. When those run out, you rely on your tax deferred investments. And then when those run out, you can rely hopefully on your tax-free investments until the end of your life. Calculating how much money you're going to need in retirement to live comfortably is also something that is part of building a great wealth system. Knowing what your household expenses are, understanding your cash flow, knowing which of the tools is going to be best for you, knowing how much money you need to put in each one along the way, and working with professionals to help you with taxes, to help you with estate planning, to help you with your investments is extremely important to building a wealth system. And finally, this is probably my favorite slide in the presentation. I think a lot of people have a misconception that in order to adhere to strict Sharia compliance, that you have to sacrifice performance, as if the non-Islamic option is somehow more profitable. A wonderful thing about kind of the market is many Sharia compliant companies are low debt. They tend to be in very stable industries, right? Food and beverage, for example. And during times of economic growth, they prosper. And during times of economic downturns, they tend to be safe assets, right? Assets that are considered less risky in the market. And so if done properly, you can actually experience higher than average returns with a completely Sharia compliant portfolio. And through us and several other organizations, you can further modify your investments. You don't have to be invested in certain companies that you have political disagreements with, or global economic disagreements with, for example. It's important that your portfolio is representative of you and the values of our community. But no, you don't have to necessarily sacrifice performance in order to adhere to your Islamic beliefs. And finally, we're going to very briefly talk about the power that this has, not only at the individual level, but at the level of a community. So, mashallah, and I'm going to hand it back to Brother Kashif in just a moment, but this is the actual value of the endowment at the Islamic Association of Raleigh in North Carolina, and what this small community was able to do for its Muslim, the congregation over the last 10 years. Kashif, please.
Jazakallah khair, Azaz. So, she's some context on why I chose to become a wealth advisor and someone that's so deeply focused on building finances for my Muslim community. I spent the past 7 years focused and working at my masjid, the Islamic Association of Raleigh, which is the largest masjid in the Southeast. Feel free to check me on those numbers and let me know. And I saw there firsthand that we had an opportunity to build something. And it was not just to collect money in donations where I would lock people in a room and not let anyone eat dinner until we hit our $1 million goal. Rather, if we built an endowment. And over the past few years, we've been diligently investing and putting a portion of our general collections into an endowment, into a waqf. Now, the masjid itself is, of course, a waqf. It's protected. It cannot be sold. It is sacred, alhamdulillah. But this is a secondary type of waqf, one that is built with the principle that our fundamental donations into it are protected in perpetuity as a sadaqah jariyah. And we can only pull from the growth from that. So in the case of the IAR, I'll tell you one quick story. Alhamdulillah, a piece of land was sold, and you can see that jump there in the numbers. That land was sold for about $1.3 million. And that was sold in about August, I want to say 2023. Come to March of 2024, the masjid needed some money. And they had the wise forethought to put that 1.3 million into an endowment, into a waqf for a future need. So when the masjid had this cash flow shortage right before Ramadan, as we can all resonate with, that 1.3 had grown to 1.5 million. And the masjid was able to pull $300,000 to offset the cash flow lull right before Ramadan. And that's just one of the powers of an endowment. Long-term, IAR has a vision that this total endowment value will grow from what is supposed to be $5 million today. These numbers have jumped since we've started this presentation. The total growth should be $30 million. At $30 million, inshallah, the whole masjid will be able to pull from its waqf, pull from its endowment to sustain itself in perpetuity. There'll be no more fundraisers for keeping the lights on, no more fundraisers to pay the utility bills. But inshallah, The Imam will be paid a full-time salary. The community will have a youth director. There'll be many executive directors that support the youth and support the community, and that money is coming from the Waqf in perpetuity. So there's never a need for a fundraiser again. That's just one of the ways an endowment can be so powerful for a community. But it can also teach the community the importance of investing in our imams. So IER is also putting aside a little bit of capital to build a pension plan for its imams to ensure that they have a retirement even after they leave working at the masjid. But that's just a quick snapshot of Islamic finance, faith and finance, as we like to call it. Azaz, I think we have one quick more slide. This is our disclosures and some question and answers section. But alhamdulillah, Jazakallah khair, Brother Azaz, for your wonderful reflections and for sharing this beautiful, beneficial knowledge. We have what looks like 3 questions in the chat. Please feel free, as we'll take turns kind of going through these. A couple questions in the chat. I'll take a couple and then I'll pass a couple over to Brother Azaz. So first question, fantastic one here we have is, I have 3 young children and I want to save for their education. What is the best way to do so? So I need to bracket this with, this is not financial advice. I'm just going to share a couple opportunities and types of funds that you can put money aside for your child. I'm not going to recommend a specific option, better or worse. You need to look at your own personal financial circumstances and situation. So we have, first up, one that's very well known is a 539 college plan. This is a state administered plan. So maybe you live in South Carolina, you can open a plan there. You can even open a plan in a different states. Say you use Charles Schwab as a brokerage, they'll open a plan in Kansas for you. Now this 529 plan allows you to contribute about $17,000 a year is the maximum. And when you pull that money out for your child's college tuition, it is thus tax-free. All the distributions are tax-free. And that growth keeps going up and you can build up a nice savings. Unfortunately, since these are state-sponsored plans, they require the utilization of bonds. We're working with a group out of Washington states. This is with CARE as well as Amana Mutual Funds to put together a Sharia-compliant 529 offering. However, if we do not intend to contribute quite so much to our children's educational futures, the other option is known as a Coverdell ESA, Educational Savings Account. And this account has a $2,000 minimum, but it allows us to invest in whatever products we wish to invest in, and that can maintain that Sharia compliance. Now, a question I want to give to you, Brother Azaz. You don't mind taking it? Brother Ziad asks, I invest in SPUS, AMAGX, and GLDM. What is your opinion of these 3? So for everyone else, those are some 3 tickers I just mentioned. Tickers is a short code for a stock or mutual fund. SPUS, AMAGX, and GLDM.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Mustafa. So with respect to the ticker symbols themselves, so Sharia portfolios, obviously, we respect them a great deal. Amana Saturna obviously is very well known within the community. I think that it's a solid foundation. So SPUS is the Sharia exclusions. I actually had one of their charts in the slide. And I believe AMAGX is the fixed income. AMAGX. Yeah, so for everyone else in the group, it's the Amana Mutual Funds Trust Growth Fund Investor. The most important thing is that you're getting, and you have the GLDM, which is the Gold Miners ETF. I think it's a fantastic foundation. Just monitor the portfolio over time. You might want to compare it to the 2 or 3 well-known kind of Sharia compliant benchmark indices, and make sure that you're not comparing directly to the S&P 500, because gold is a commodity and the AMAGX is going to have like sukuk and other type of investments in it. So your performance may not be directly at the same level as like an all equity portfolio, but alhamdulillah, these are very well-known investment houses across the board. And your second question is, also, if you invest once instead of percentages every month, does that still work, or is it better to do a bit every month? This is a great question. I think what we call that is called dollar cost averaging, and perhaps Kashif can chime in as well. I'm a big fan of dollar cost averaging because, as I showed you, the price fluctuations of the market very rapidly, right? Like in January, the prices were expensive. In April, the prices became more affordable, and now the prices are even more expensive than they were at the beginning of the year. If you try to time the market with big one-off purchases, that's fine, especially when you're beginning, because we want you to participate. But if you have the option, especially with modern technology, to automate your investing, you're going to do what's called dollar cost averaging, right? So the money automatically leaves your paycheck. You don't have to think about it. You're not going to spend it because it's not in your pocket. And you're going to get the average prices of some of these investments over the course of years. And naturally, mathematically, as prices go down, you're going to be able to buy more. And as prices go up, you'll naturally buy less. And so over time, over the course of years, I personally think the dollar cost averaging is a safer and more efficient strategy, but participating is still better than not participating. So I hope that answers your question. Go ahead, Kashif. You can take the next question if you wish. The next question was from
Thank
an
you, sir.
anonymous attendee. What retirement options can you recommend for someone on an R1 visa? Are there possible consequences to be aware of when investing or saving in a retirement account?
A fantastic question, brother. So R1s, H1s, F1 visas, these are all different types of non-permanent, maybe work-based visas. R1 is the specific religious-based visa. So maybe you're a highly talented Qari or Imam from overseas, and now you've come to the US for a short period, and it all depends on your plans. If you have a long-term plan of spending time in the United States, you'll be automatically contributing to your Social Security plan, and you require 40 credits. This is basically 10 years of work. A credit is 1/4 of work to qualify for Social Security. So that depends on your plans there. You do have the opportunity to participate in any 401k plans that your employer might offer if your imam or community center allows for that. And you would treat that just like you were a citizen of the United States. Likewise, you also have the opportunity to participate in an IRA, an individual retirement account. And if you were part of a 401k at an employer or something like that, you can roll your money into an IRA. IRAs come in two variations, a Roth or a traditional, and both of them allow you to contribute money, allow it to grow tax-free, and then you pull out at the age of retirement. Then now, when it comes to specific credits, and maybe you spend 9 years in the US and you're building up those credits, building up Social Security, and in your 9th year, unfortunately, you're no longer able to stay in the United States. Several countries have a kind of a subsidy totalization agreement, whereby if your country has a similar program to Social Security, or they have a way of benchmarking that you have worked a certain number of credits, a certain number of hours, you're able to pull from that back home. I would love to talk to you a little more one-on-one. I've seen a couple of these cases lately of individuals asking, and it really depends on what country of origin you may return to, because they might have certain non-resident tax consequences. Some are down to 0, some are all the way up to 50%. So I invite you to reach out to me personally, and we can talk about your specific tax situations there, as I've been seeing quite a bit of that lately. Okay, then another question we got here. Any tips on balancing saving a solid emergency fund versus not being too late into investing and saving for retirement? It can take years to reach 6 months of expenses. Remember, this is a fantastic question here. I'm going to chime in, and inshallah, Azaz can add some context. I feel that the emergency fund is kind of the backbone of your financial growth, your financial foundation. And it comprises of 3 pieces. And actually, you know what? Let's go a little bit more direct here, if you don't mind. I'm going to try something out. Can everyone see my little whiteboard that I'm throwing up here? So I like to think of building a financial future as if I were building a house, right? And you guys can tab over to this. I think everyone can see this. So if I build a house, I apologize, I'm a financial manager. I am not an artist, right? That house's foundation is comprised of three key pieces. One is your expenses, one is your emergency, and one is your retirement. So when you think of them all in concert, all together. Now, in that case, you want to think of your emergency, 3 to 6, as a key piece of this. Likewise, your retirement is a key piece of this. I want everyone to really lock in and consider just doing 3 months, 3 months of expenses. 3 months of expenses is all you need to build an emergency fund. And you can do that in concert with beginning your retirement plan, retirement savings. So if you have a 401k option, go for that, hit the match, but definitely try and prioritize that emergency fund because we don't know what's happening in the global market. We don't know if our jobs are 100% secure. So definitely try and do that in parallel with building a long-term financial future.
Great answer, Kashif. I would also like to add a caveat that an emergency fund doesn't necessarily always have to be sitting in just cash under the pillow. For many of our clients, we encourage them to open an investment account. And an investment account is very liquid, right? So the money that goes into this account is money that you earned, right? We call this after-tax dollars. And you can hold it as gold, you could hold it as sukuk, you could hold it in as any investment you wish. And as long as you can get access to it in an emergency, it can be a sufficient emergency account. Of course, it's always good to have cash in the bank account as well, but over time, your emergency fund may be growing as you don't need it, and it can continue to grow, long after you've stopped putting money into it, and you can start putting investments into other accounts, inshallah.
Fantastic. I think we have time for one more question, inshallah. Now, Brother Azaz, you and I have shared some wonderful points, especially yourself. How could I potentially reach out to you if I want to talk more? And what would kind of the process be like if I said, hey, I want to work with a financial advisor?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go on our website, crescentpw.com, and through that, you'll be able to get access to our support email. You can find information, my information, Kashif's contact information as well. We would love to sit down with all of you that have participated in the webinar and have a conversation first and foremost, but also let's do a quick audit of your financial situation. Let's build a quick cash flow model. Let's see where you are today and where we believe you will be, 10, 20, 30 years as you get into your retirement. I think, and especially for myself and Kashif, we'd be honored to have the opportunity just to help you guys. Again, the other and most important thing is even if you don't choose to work with us, if you don't think this is the right time to start investing, that we will always be part of your network from here on forward. We're always going to be brothers in the same community, and you are always welcome to reach out to us via email or through our website. And we're happy to just be experts and provide guidance and subject matter expertise on these things so that it's not causing you anxiety and you can add some clarity to your financial journey, inshallah.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for elaborating on that. And other things, just want to note that all of our consultations are completely complimentary. Our goal is to support and provide value for our Muslim community. So they're all complimentary meetings. We're happy to provide that value, that service. Likewise, as I mentioned, Azaz's focus area is a lot on the finances, understanding how money works. My passion is building institutions, building masjid endowments. So if you have any questions regarding that, please feel free to put in the chat or reach out to me, inshallah. Another service we'd love to provide for your community is if you found benefit in this session, we could work with you on putting together maybe a small series, maybe do a webinar, maybe we come in person to your community and we talk about financial literacy. We showcase some of these opportunities that community members can take advantage of. I always feel that a rising tide lifts all ships. If our community is doing better, then our masjids are doing better and our imams are doing better. We'll take one more question, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, Brother Mazhar. It was a pleasure speaking with me. I'm glad that someone felt it was a pleasure talking to me. As an imam who began implementing a similar discussion earlier this year, I can certainly say there are no regrets. Jazakallah khair for the vote of confidence of discuss the importance of having a discussion about halal financial independence for our mashayikh. Of course, we love to support our mashayikh, support our communities, and that's ultimately what builds the financial future. If we're not doing it with barakah and not focus on those that are focused on the rest of us, there is no purpose in doing the work we do. I think that's all the questions we have received thus far. Jazakallah khair to everyone for joining us on this wonderful panel. We look forward to hearing from you guys soon, inshallah. And if you had any friends that were unable to attend or had challenges joining today's session, there will be a recording of this emailed out to everyone that signed up for the listserv. So you have a couple more minutes to share that link out and encourage some friends to receive a recording of this video. Jazakallah khair to everyone. May Allah bless you and put barakah in your finances and put barakah into your communities. And we look forward to talking to you guys soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.